Hello and welcome to the Fedora Files. I am Gregory Fedora and I am so glad you are here. Today we are going to look into a book. It's an interesting book. If you like uh, learning about the early days of America and especially interesting stories, you're going to love this book. We are going to delve into South Mountain Magic, Tales of Old Maryland by Madeline Vinton Dahlgren. Miss Dahlgren lived in the 1800s, and she wrote a lot of the tales about South Mountain and that we love to hear about. So let's dive into it. In the next few weeks, we're going to go into this book because I think it's interesting. And it's one of those, it's almost a forgotten book. People don't know about it. And I think it's one of these that we really need to keep around. People need to learn about it and actually learn about her. I'm not going to read the chapters verbatim. I am going to read two pages at the beginning. One is the publisher's note, and the other is a preface by Miss Dahlgren. And I'm doing that so you can get an idea of who she was and what this book was about to her, and the benefits we can get from it because it is historical and it's interesting to learn about the past and about people and what's there. So let's dive into it right here. This is the publisher's note and what they want you to know. Madeline Dahlgren, born 1825, died in 1898, was certainly one of the more noted yet sadly forgotten women of her time. Born to the influential family of an Ohio congressman, she always remained situated amongst high society. Widowed at a young age with two small children, she married John Dahlgren, a widower himself with children. Dahlgren was a decorated naval officer and the inventor of the artillery used by the USS Monitor and other ships of the era. Madeline served as a hostess for the noted Literary Club of Washington, D.C. Journalism and writing were her passions. In her lifetime, she published articles for local papers on her opposing views of suffragism and local issues. And again, suffrage is the right to vote, and she was huge about women's right to vote. She wrote several books, including Memoirs of Admiral Dahlgren in 1882, a successful book on etiquette titled Etiquette of the Social Life in Washington in 1873, a collection of fantastical stories published after her death, The Woodley Lane Ghost and Other Stories in 1899, and this book, South Mountain Magic, in 1882. The story behind this book begins in 1876 when, widowed yet again, Madeline purchased the old South Mountain Inn in Maryland and transformed it into a private summer residence. She fell in love with South Mountain House, writing an essay entitled Medievalism in Maryland, which she describes the estate near the Civil War battleground as a contemporary medieval castle. There she lived and entertained for 20 years. She was a devout Catholic, and she had a small chapel built on the grounds. That chapel is still there on South Mountain. You can go check it out, and they do different events there, which are pretty cool. Most recently, they did Cryptids by Candlelight, which was sponsored by the Snallygaster Museum. But she was also buried in there until vandals broke in and desecrated her gravesite, and then she and her family members were moved from that area, which is sad. During her time spent at the estate, Madeline became fascinated with the legends and superstitions of the local, many of which were Germanic descent. Her religious faith adapted to these odd traditions and bits of folklore, encompassing them rather than excluding, as proof of the existence of a creator and divine will. Indeed, there are many passages of the book that are poetic in stating her beliefs, yet she does take a certain delight in recounting some of the more sinister stories. As for South Mountain House, it still stands. The building had once been an inn and returned to its role as a tavern in the 20th century. Today, it is one of the finer dining establishments in the state of Maryland. As for the legends that haunt the mountain, this book is their only surviving testament. Uh, if you ever can go to South Mountain Inn, go check it out. Great food. It's a great little tavern. It's cool. Now, here's the preface written by Miss Dahlgren herself. When some years ago we became the owner of South Mountain House and some 200 acres of land surrounding it on the mountain summit, we retained the well-known name of the old hostelry, but converted it into a private residence. We were led to make the purchase originally because we were captivated by the beauty of the splendid views in every direction, as well as those to be seen from the historic house itself. The fact that the Battle of South Mountain made the ground classic added greatly in our appreciation to the interest of the natural features of the charming landscape. But it was only after a summer residence of several years on South Mountain that we became aware of the very peculiar and weird character of the beautiful place. South Mountain House stands at present like an old manor seat surrounded by tenantry, being the only place of any size on the mountain. It is the radius around which, within a mile, are to be found a circle of cabins occupied by an honest, laborious, but very poor people, though these mountaineers are principally of German descent. Growing out of a familiar acquaintance with their habits of thought and action, the writer gradually learned their superstitions and heard the various narratives to be found in this book. She now presents these extraordinary stories as they were told to her, and recounts the practices she believes to be in vogue. The reader will find that they present, if not an instructive, at least a curious collection. Madeline Dahlgren. So that is the note, the publisher's note, and Madeline's intention for the book. We're now going to look at chapter 1. Like I said, I'm not going to read verbatim, but the first chapter is called Thoughts on the Occult, chapter 1. Now, I want to explain some of what she talks about and what she says, and how it fits in to her belief system and what the book portrays. One, I want to look into what is the occult in her view. A lot of times we hear the word occult and we immediately go to evil, and that's kind of a sad, because it doesn't necessarily mean that. The actual definition, I'm going to read that, is a noun. It's supernatural, mystical, and magical beliefs, practices, or phenomenon of or involving or related to supernatural, mystical, or magical powers or phenomenon. So that's basically the basic definition of a cult. It doesn't say evil, it doesn't say bad. Her belief system, being Catholic in that day and age, she believed, and this would all have Christianity, the saints, the miracles of Jesus, the miracles of God would fall under a cult, because they were phenomenal. They were supernatural in nature. They were mystical. They were different than what you saw on the everyday level. And that was kind of her belief system. And as was the people on South Mountain. A cult didn't have a bad connotation. Now, they differentiate the kind of occultic things. Like nowadays, we say supernatural, and we kind of take that as the term as how they use the cult. Like supernatural encompasses all manner of nature of good and bad, dark magic, white magic, miracles of God, angels, demons. Supernatural encompasses all that. In the 1800s, it wasn't that way. When they said supernatural, it was more about relating to something beyond observable universe, of relating to God, demigods, spirits, something that departed from the usual day-to-day things of nature. So supernatural was things outside of nature, miracles, those kind of things, but of a good intent, of good things. Whereas there was another term which they used, that we don't use as ever. I don't ever hear anyone use this term. It's preternatural, which is more negative in nature. It's again existing outside of nature. It's beyond the natural, extraordinary, especially meaning psychics and sorcerers and witches. Okay. And in that day and age, those things were negative. And so demonic things were preternatural. And supernatural was angelic things, God things, good in nature, preta, dark, super good. So you got to get those two definitions. That's in her book, and that's her mindset in writing this book. So you have to understand that. So, like someone with preternatural powers, even in theology, old theologians wrote about preternatural. They used the term, it would distinguish between the marvels of God and the deception of the devil. They believed preternatural was just trickery, demonic, like I said, witchcraft, and that those things. Even in theologians use this term quite a bit. Now, as we move on, she mentions two men, which as I read, I had to look them up because I'd never heard of them. But she studied these two guys and studied their works. And so I thought, if you are going to read it, this will help you understand who they are and what they were. The first was Henrik Cornelius Agrippa von Netzine. I believe that's how you say it. But in it, she just refers to him as Agrippa. He was a German Renaissance polymath, physician, legal scholar, soldier, theologian, and occult writer. He wrote 3 books on the occult philosophy published in 1533, and it drew heavily upon the Kabbalah, Hermetism, and Neoplatonism. The other guy is Robert Flood. He was also from the 1500s. He was a prominent English physician, and he was both fascinated with the scientific and the occult. He is remembered as an astrologer, a mathematician, cosmologist, a Kabbalist, and a Rosicrucian. Rosicrucian is, again, another occult type of thing. He is best known for his compilations on occult philosophy. Again, occult not being evil, but more supernatural and preternatural. He was explaining the different phenomenon that he saw occurring that was outside of science and what people believed. Now, the Kabbalah, I want to explain what that is because you may not know it, and she refers to it in the first chapter. The Kabbalah is a Jewish mysticism, and the practitioners of the Kabbalah, they believe that the origins predate religions forming of a primordial blueprint for creation philosophies, religion, science, arts, and political systems. Historically, the Kabbalah kind of emerged in the 12th and 13th centuries, and the text was kind of composed in the late 13th century. Now, it doesn't mean that it was just made up. These were traditional beliefs and stories. One of the most famous Kabbalah stories is a creation myth. And they believed that Adam was formed, and then God made Adam's first wife, Lilith. And Lilith was a little too much for Adam to handle. And he went to God and said, "Hey, I can't deal with this. She's just overbearing. I cannot take it. Nag, 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 nag." And God was okay. So God banished Lilith because she was not helpful. She was a hindrance. And she was kind of banished to the realm of darkness and sad. Okay. Now, people be like, "Oh, okay, I've never heard that." Well, what's interesting is, if you go back to some of the older writings in the Old Testament, in the book of Isaiah, I think also in Psalms, there's a reference to screeching out. And that they are feared this screeching out. Well, what you find is the Gentiles had no idea who Lilith was. They had never heard this story. They didn't know this mythology. So they transformed Lilith to a screeching owl. But if you go to some of the old Hebrew writings of the Isaiah, some of the Psalms, and the different Old Testament, they mention Lilith. And so it was a mythical story. They talk about it. I think it's also in Job. You can find wherever you see the term screeching out, it was originally Lilith, because it was like a scary bedtime story. She was a boogeyman. Doesn't mean it was true. it was just a story, and it was referenced because the people would know. Like, you don't want to be like Lilith. And so that was what was in those stories and in the Old Testament. So one thing that Madeline believed thoroughly was that humans had like electricity throughout us, and we kind of know that the brain and the nervous system were electric. She believed that made us magnetic, so we would be drawn to others like us. Like, and some people believe in auras, stuff like that. And so her belief was people of supernatural beliefs were attracted to other people's supernatural beliefs. Basically, mean if you were of the light of God, you were attracted to other people like that. If you were preternatural, you were attracted to other preternatural people. So if you were darker, you were, and in truth, that there is some truth to that. Like, who we hang out with is people who have our same belief system, and so we are drawn to those people, and people we don't, we kind of push away. And so she was right about that. um Last thing that she really believed was that the fall of Adam and Eve, the fall of man, that when they sinned, if you don't know the story, it's in the Bible, it's easy, it's in Genesis. you know Eve and Adam were in the garden. Eve is tempted by the devil. She takes the bite of the apple, offers it to Adam, who was right there with her. So I just want that to be clear, because a lot of people are like, oh, it's Eve's fault. No, Adam was right with her. The other thing is, in the creation story, Adam was told exactly what to do. He relayed partial truths to Eve, apparently, because when she was asked about things, she gave an explanation that God never said to Adam. So it was obviously kind of like the telephone game, where God told Adam and Adam kind of told Eve, but not fully. But the thing is, Adam was there. If you read the text, Eve didn't have to go find him. She turned to Adam and said, here, try it. It's good. But Adam knew he shouldn't. So the sin was Adam's. I just want to be clear on that. If we're going to talk about this, because this was also Madeline's belief system. She felt that when man fell, there was a break from the connection of nature. So she believed supernatural and preternatural were part of nature. It was how we were supposed to exist. And because in the Bible it said we were made in God's image. And so that would mean we understood supernatural things, but when we fell, that broke away. So we only could understand the natural that we could see and touch. We lost it, because also it talks in the Bible how God would walk with Adam and Eve and talk with them in the garden. So there was a relationship there that got broken when when Adam deliberately went against what God told him to do. So then she believed, we're going on to what Madeline believed. The connection was broke, and but humans still had that in them, this desire for this connection to the supernatural. And those who followed God, and she as Catholic, those who followed Jesus Christ, God, would reconnect to that supernatural. And that's how you got saints. And that those who correctly use the connection to nature and to the supernatural, they were supernatural, those would be the saints, the prophets, and so on. Those who abused that connection, who found it, but through the darker side, found it maybe through the serpent, as she would put it, were the witches, the sorcerers, the dark people. And so that is her mindset. If you read chapter 1, that is where she goes with it. And it's interesting, because that is going to be the foundation for the rest of this book, the stories. So her belief of supernatural and preternatural is important to understand her mindset as a Catholic, as growing up, as her belief system. So that is where she's coming from. And I think it helps understand the book, because if you just read it and you don't understand these terms and understand where she's coming from, you don't necessarily know what she's portraying and what she's saying. Because like some people thought she was a witch, and she would be horrified to think you thought she was into witchcraft. I mean, it's interesting that she talks about it a lot, but she's like, this is bad, but she likes to tell you about it. And it's kind of like a car accident. Like, we're horrified at the car accident, but we can't look away. And she was the same way. She was all about supernatural, but that preternatural stuff, she could not look away. She was fascinated by it because it was something she would not do, but she was drawn to. So that's chapter 1. I hope if you can get the book, it's on Amazon. You can get a copy. It's only $14. It's really interesting. If you want to get it, read it. Next week, I'm going to be going over chapter 2 and explain what was in that. And I'll give you a little, like, chapter 2 is where we really start getting into South Mountain. It's South Mountain House traditions. And she's going to be getting into more and more about South Mountain and the history of this area. And it's really a fascinating, cool history to learn. And just, it's neat to read about these different time periods and these different people and their mindsets. And I think it's fun. I hope that you've enjoyed this. And please like, subscribe, share. Go to my YouTube channel if you're not on YouTube. It is youtube.com/ at the Fedora Files. You can also find me on Facebook, the Fedora Files. I'm on Spotify. I'm on all the podcast places, the Fedora Files. So it's all the Fedora Files. It's really easy to find. So just look me up. I'm there. I also have a website. It's not the Fedora Files because I'm a dummy. It's fedoracrt.com. But check that out as well. And please, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for listening. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, please leave me a comment, send me an email, whatever. And my email is fedoracrt@gmail.com. So just send me out, and I would love to respond to you, and I'll do what I can. Find me on Instagram as well. There'll be a link below on that. And remember, as always, stay safe and keep searching.
Check out fedoracrt.com today.